All right, it's 4 o'clock. Buildings, Facility, Capital Expenditure Committee. In attendance is Dave Cordero, Josh McNeil, Fred Small, Dan Salvucci, Fred Lynham, Justin Evans, Aaron Taylor, Don Essen. In the gallery, we have John Galvin and Lisa Green. I'll wait for Frank to finish up what he's doing. I'm not sure what you're doing there.
Okay, go ahead. I'm ready.
All right. First question off, Frank. Did the Board of Selectmen vote to postpone town meeting
Yes, both meeting and election.
and election?
Correct.
Oh, interesting. So for town meeting, has a potential future date been chosen?
Well, the chosen date was May. Let me look at the calendar. I want to say May 3rd. June 3rd, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be the date. We just had to pick a date in advance, and that was the date we chose because it's 30 days out. It is possible that town meeting would not occur until July.
Okay, and then with the vote, does that work similar to the postponement of town meeting?
What do you mean with what vote?
Well, you said the town meeting was postponed. I thought you meant the ballot vote that we had scheduled was also postponed. Am I misunderstanding that?
I guess I'm being dense. What vote are we talking about other than
I don't know.
You mean the election, right?
Yeah.
election?
Yeah.
But the election has to be held by law by June 30th. So it's still a date to be determined.
TBD. Yeah.
No provision for having an election in the subsequent fiscal year.
Interesting. Okay. So are there, of all the warrant articles that are in the draft warrant, do any of them, that the way they are currently formulated, do any of them require an election vote if passed during town meeting?
No.
Okay. All right.
The Community Preservation Act would require a vote, but that would be planned for November.
Yeah, but that is separate and distinct from the article.
Okay. So Frank, do you have anything for the town administrator report?
Just hoping that things change soon.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we voted, we met last week, so the only change that I see, well, two changes that I see that is new information for this meeting is one, that the town meeting has been postponed, and that Frank, that you provided the finance committee with I think as complete as we can get copy of the draft warrant.
Right. There's a couple of things that are up in the air. One is an article to provide necessary funds for COVID-related costs. And there is an additional item that may have to be addressed. Because it involves bargaining across the board, I don't want to get into the specifics, but we may be looking for additional money from town meeting due to costs associated with staffing for the town.
Okay. And I'm sorry, the first one you broke up, is that the COVID-19 article that's up in the air?
Yes, there is an article that suggests we would fund a sum of money for COVID-19 related costs. But there is also another potential cost that I have to address with the Board of Selectmen, hopefully next week. That is potentially related to COVID-19, but not a COVID-19 cost that's reimbursable.
Okay. Okay. So in terms of the chairman report, sorry, my screens keep jumping. I don't know if that's happening to you guys at all, but it's a little distracting. But that's all right. So Frank has provided the Finance Committee with a copy of the draft articles minus the ones that you've heard him mention there. Quick calculations made, with in respect to available funds for next year, with the levy, which is taxes plus 2.5, at least 2.5, plus revenue, along with articles that require funding, some type of monetary source. That number is based on what we're seeing in the Finance Committee right now, very within less than $100,000 in difference. Meaning that if we fully funded the Article 2 as requested by the departments, and we fully funded all the articles, including articles that we haven't seen in this committee, which are non-warrant articles by definition, is that essentially it's about a $58,000 difference. I mean, we're butting up right against the available funds for next year, assuming that if everything gets, all the line items are funded fully as requested in Article 2, and that all the articles are fully funded as written and taken out of the levy of free cash. So in terms of what that means, two things. One is that you never want to spend all your available funds for your fiscal year, because you always want to keep some money back for emergencies. Frank, I'm sorry to ask this, but do you know like an average number that is typically not spent for the fiscal year and remains as free cash, or drops down to free cash?
Well, we have always tried to retain typically it's been a couple of $100,000 that we left on the table in free cash, because if something occurs between the time we start the fiscal year and we set the tax rate, that is really the only revenue source we can use if we've levied up to the levy limit. So we would hope to have at least a couple of $100,000 available for appropriation if needed. Now, whether that money is left on the table as free cash or transferred to stabilization, I can tell you that the bond markets refer more positively to having unencumbered free cash than they do to having it in stabilization.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting. All right. So one other issue, one other thing, thinking going forward, that hasn't been calculated, is monies that departments don't spend for the fiscal year and then get dropped into free cash once they close the books in June.
Right.
Same question, Frank. Is there an average number that we see that typically comes back as a total?
Well, it varies from year to year. The component of free cash is created by unexpended funds and unanticipated revenues. If local receipts are higher, then we have more free cash. If tax takings are redeemed, we have more free cash. So I don't know that there's an average. I've seen years where we've closed a couple of $100,000 to revenue. I've seen years where we've closed $600,000 to revenue. I have not seen that recently.
Okay.
Could I ask a question, Frank?
Sure.
I know, and I've asked for them to send you a letter for the thumb locks, about $45,000 that Whitman will not have to pay for.
Right.
That they did get the money in grants. So they've had, where does that money go
So
once you receive something in writing saying that they're not going to need it?
One of two things are going to happen. It'll either sit there and close to free cash at the end of the current fiscal year, or we can vote to transfer that money elsewhere. And that, of course, will require an article. And that's one of the things I was leaving open, because we knew that that was pretty much likely, but I didn't want to act until it was certain.
Yeah. And I did speak to Ernie today, and I did ask him to put it in writing and send something over to you, so you have a physical document as well.
So then we're going to have to decide whether that money should be left to close out or be transferred to another purpose.
Okay. And if I remember correctly, that's about, is it 60 or 80,000?
Oh,
total?
it's a total of 45,000
Yeah.
with the thumb locks. The grant was 60,000, and here's where I didn't fully comprehend from Ernie, because I thought that we were going to be able to put in for some doors for the remaining dollars, and evidently the doors got kicked back. I have to do a little bit more digging with him, but there was a total of $60,000 that came back to the district in grants. It's very well possible that other 15,000 ended up over in the Hanson side.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we did appropriate money for doors for
Yes,
all three
correct.
schools.
Yeah, and those have been done or are in the process of getting done. But the question is, was those considered to be part of that safety and security grant that we could get the money for, and therefore it wouldn't cost Whitman as well?
Right.
And Fred, that's something that you're following up on as well? The doors?
Yes. Yep. Yep.
All right.
But at this point, I would just expect the 45,000 for sure. I think would be the best way to say it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. That's a good chunk of change right there. So so right now, again, with the current levy, the current warrant articles, the anticipated budget for 2021, again, we're buttoned up against that. There's going to be some distance brought in by what comes in as non-used money for fiscal year 2020. Right? And what we're hearing is that we the town of Whitman wants to keep, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars in free cash for non anticipated expenditures. So, and then, so what then now with the COVID-19, if I'm understanding, Frank, that's going to now be an expenditure. And then, so now we're shrinking that distance between available budget and our spending needs. So it's we're not in such a flush. Well, based on the Article 2 and the spending requests, we're not really flush in cash, I guess would be the subject, would be the way to describe that.
I would say that's a fair assessment.
Right. I think maybe in other, if there's been a lot of changes done by recommendation of the override committee to Dan, if you, yeah, thank you. There's been a lot of changes to the Article 2 based on the override committee recommendations to the Board of Selectmen, which has created an influx of cash not typically seen in past years, and won't be seen for following years. Meaning that, for example, and I think John Galvin has mentioned that in this committee before, is that with the dissolving of the ambulance account, that brings in what is this year's revenue into the Article 2, as well as next year's anticipated revenue into the levy. So it's kind of it's a double windfall for 1 year, I guess, is the best way to describe that. That won't happen next year. So next year, you know, the ambulance account takes in upwards to $1 million a year. We won't see that next year. All right. So our last meeting, we were voting warrant articles, and Frank on Tuesday provided the Finance Committee with the draft warrant, which for the most part provided funding sources for each article. Now, Frank, I was doing the math real quick today, and it's estimated that we may have upwards to 1.9 million in free cash for at the end of the season, this fiscal year. And if by doing the math, looking at the warrants, the articles within the warrant, not all articles, the funding source for all articles are from free cash, with except that we'll take the water and sewer enterprise in Chapter 90, the roadway funds, out for a moment. But there's a lot. There's a few articles on this, and they're not considered capital items based on the way we define capital. But the funding source is raise and appropriate. Does that mean that you anticipate paying for those articles not out of the levy or not out of free cash?
Well, any raise and appropriate comes from the levy. The raise portion means taxation, and then appropriate means to spend. So whenever you see raise and appropriate, that is part of that money we have defined as being either in the tax rate we've set or in the local receipts we've identified as funds to operate with. That's all part of that window.
Okay. So, so when it comes to these warrant articles, if just for argument's sake, if all the warrant articles are from the levy or from free cash, is there a distinction there in terms of?
Yes, because free cash is not, while it's money that's available, it's not part of your levy. It's not part of your local receipts or your taxation. So that has to be specifically appropriated from free cash. And the net effect of that is if in a typical budget year, you have a lot of requests for spending and you have a significant amount of free cash, and the levy won't support everything. You identify what will come out of the levy and what should be paid for out of free cash to reach an acceptable balance at the end of the year.
Okay.
And then another thing, assuming that you levy to your capacity, the only money left to work with once you've completed town meeting is free cash. And that's only available until we close it when we set the new tax rate.
And when is the new tax rate set?
Typically in October or November.
And then, so if I always have an issue, I've all my time on the finance committee, I always have an issue with, I have a hard time understanding free cash versus levy when it comes to warrant articles. But I don't know. This,
Essentially, David, it's discretion. You look at something that people want to purchase, or you want to fund a particular, free cash should always be limited to one-time purchases. Levy is available for one-time purchases and recurring budgets. So that's the real difference between the two. You should never want to use free cash to pay for something that you're going to pay for every year.
okay. Okay. So if of all the warrant, say you took all the warrant articles and that are currently to be paid under the levy and just shifted them over to free cash, just hypothetically speaking, how does that affect that affects the ability to raise the levy, correct? Am I understanding that?
If you did all that, it means you would have more money available in the levy to use for other purposes or to end up with an excess levy capacity when you set your tax rate. And God knows we don't want to go down that road again.
So the goal would be to spend up to your levy capacity and then spend free cash to an amount where you're allowing whatever your, the town of Whitman feels comfortable allowing for the following year. I guess
Yes.
is a layman's way to say that. Okay.
Yes, and that's, most towns use free cash as part of their capital plan because again, it's those single purchases that are non-recurring. If we used 123,000 in free cash to buy an International 32 pound truck, we may buy another one 6 or 7 years from now, but that isn't a recurring expense. So it makes sense to use the free cash for that. But if, for example, we agreed that we want to purchase 2 cruisers a year, we have to find a way to work that into the levy so that we're not relying on free cash to make those purchases, because they're really not capital, they're recurring year after year. So when we use free cash to pay the first of 3 payments for a cruiser, we're buying into, hey, Dan, you're connected.
Yep, I'm there.
We're buying into
I get into it.
a situation where the reliance on free cash becomes a reliance on your annual budget. That's what we have to stay away from. There's actually one town in Western Mass that hasn't spent free cash in 3 years. They have over $5 million sitting on their books in free cash. Sorry, not Western Mass, Northeastern Mass. And there was almost a raid on that money this year by someone who was interested in spending a lot of it for something else. And it's a fairly affluent community.
Did they keep it in free cash?
Yes. Nobody realized that free cash was simply something you need 50% plus 1 vote to spend. And then someone finally figured it out. So they rushed to put together a plan, and they transferred most of it into stabilization.
Yeah. Okay.
I'd love to have that problem.
Yeah. So, all right. So that's just my understanding, and I hope I didn't bore everyone, but I have a hard time understanding this every year, and hopefully one year it will stick for me. Does anybody else have any questions on that? Okay, just me.
Well, hold on. I've got one question. So free cash, I'm just going to try to summarize what I think I heard. Everything with the levy is basically from taxation, and it should be driven by what the town needs are, the anticipated needs are from a budget standpoint from all the departments.
Correct.
Free cash is basically from revenue that we get from taxation from sales of other things, and probably now the ambulance fund goes into free cash. Is that kind of where does free cash get achieved from? How do we obtain cash?
Free cash will come from every budget that closes on June 30th that has money left in it.
Okay.
That's budget appropriations. It will also come from extraordinary revenue such as sale of property, grants that we receive to offset spending we've done in the past. 2 years from now, we'll be seeing some free cash from FEMA for what's happening right now. And that'll be part of it. And you have to think of it as money that doesn't regularly come in. It's one-time funds. It's one time in, one time out. In a well-balanced budget, part of your levy, all of your levy will support your budget. Part of your levy will support your capital plans, but there'll be a portion of money that will come out of free cash, which really is just money you've set aside from year to year by not spending it.
And then we have the enterprise fund, which is basically from the DPW.
And that fund has its own system of free cash. The revenue that the DPW takes in operating sewer and water pays for all their expenses. At the end of the year, if what they've taken in is more than what they've spent, the balance goes into retained earnings. That's what we choose to call it. We don't like to call it free cash because people think something different about it. But it is essentially free cash in the sewer and water enterprise account. That money can only be used to fund operations and expenses for the ratepayers rather than the taxpayers.
So that money there will the Auburn Street pump station repairs and the pipe from from the pump station to Brockton. That'll all be covered by the enterprise fund.
It will be covered by the enterprise fund, which will include significant borrowing.
Okay.
And
That's what I
then
thought.
that borrowing will be paid for by adjusting the rates that people pay for sewer and water.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I just wanted clarity on that. Thank you, Frank.
Now, there's nothing to prevent, other than good sense, there's nothing to prevent the town from taking the 4.9 million we have now and putting it all toward the cost of the pipe. But what you've then done is you've left yourself exposed to virtually no option for future planning that doesn't include additional rate hikes and other things.
Right. And if I understand correctly, I mean, essentially the sewer and water, I would assume they would function and have the same assumptions that the town of Whitman does in terms of their retained earnings and spending, meaning that they keep money in for one-term unexpected emergencies and things of that nature.
Right.
Yeah.
And both systems require town meeting votes to spend that money.
Okay. So with Frank, with the town meeting now being postponed at this point until June 3rd, when is the drop dead date that you would go to printing at this point? That includes the final warrant articles with recommendations from both FinCom and
The law, the statute requires that the warrant be posted 7 days at least in advance of a meeting. That doesn't leave a lot of time for people to digest things. I'm thinking that our town meeting is going to be somewhere toward the middle or end of June. Just my feeling based on my belief that May 4th is nothing special and nothing's going to happen to change the way we're living right now. I'm hopeful that by that time we may have options or plans to hold a town meeting. It could conceivably go beyond June 30th. And if it does, then we have a different set of issues because we're going to have to prepare a temporary budget, which hopefully would be our regular budget just planned out. And then we need to get the permission of the Department of Revenue to actually spend that money.
So a temporary budget is does not require the vote of the town?
No, it still has, no, it doesn't require a town meeting, but it requires approval by the Department of Revenue because we're actually doing something that may or may not be in the best interest of the citizenry who turn out to vote. So they have that provision. They can't shut off the town. We have services we have to deliver, so there has to be an alternative if we're not able to meet. And it may come to that, but I think it's our responsibility to keep working as we are now to develop a budget and release it, plan it and release it. I am asking Dan, I spoke with Dan earlier today, and Justin, I don't remember if I talked with you about this yesterday, but I'm asking the Board of Selectmen to schedule a meeting next week to address some issues that I foresee having to deal with outside the budget, but which may have an impact on the budget. And there are issues that will be addressed in executive session. The following week, we're going to have a regular meeting, and I am hoping, sincerely hoping, that we have a final warrant to present at that meeting for review by the selectmen. The Finance Committee chair has requested to meet jointly with the selectmen, and it looks like that meeting will likely be May 5th.
Okay. So,
It'd be real nice to have all this wrapped up by then.
right. So I guess that was my question. So in terms of, we understand what the law anticipates in terms of having a warrant posted. So am I hearing from you that in terms of what you anticipate having everything finalized is by May 5th?
Following our May 5th meeting, yes.
Okay. All right. Did I didn't I was CC'd on those emails, but did the finance committee chair indicate to you why he felt that a May meeting, meeting within May, early May, seeing that the meeting is being delayed, he felt was necessary? I know I agree with him when it's necessary, but I guess my question is why so early, where you still have a month of time between that and the potential future town meeting?
Because I don't think anybody in this roll process believes that we will be able to invite 150 people into the town hall on May 4th. We're facing the reality of this pandemic, and the May 4th date or the May 1st date that the governor chose, I think was just to give people some hope that there's light at the end of the tunnel and that it isn't a train. I don't really think anyone believed that by May 4th, kids would be back in school or that we would be freely associating again. So we have to ride this thing out, and it doesn't make sense to keep a date that's going to trigger certain actions to be taken in advance of that date for the purpose of meeting that date. So it made sense to just postpone it. And using the moderator method, the meeting can be postponed a maximum of 30 days, and then we then have to act again if we're not ready to meet on that alternate date.
Okay. All right. Before we go into the warrant, the capital warrant articles, does anybody have any questions or comments? Okay. So
I have one thing. I know we were going to talk about this, and this is probably should have happened at the beginning of the meeting, but I personally, I think Zoom is a better platform than this. I'm having a lot of problems with things going in and out. I don't know what everybody else feels, but if we were to vote on the next meeting like this, my vote would be for Zoom instead of this GoToMeeting. I don't know what anybody else feels.
I can make.
I'm not having any.
I can make that happen for you. Josh and I can talk about it afterwards, and we can talk about it. What's happening, Don? Are you like, is audio cutting out or?
Yeah, well, I've had to reboot twice. I don't know if it's Dan's mic or something, but a lot of it seems like, I guess, like a lot of static in here, and it just, yeah. The platform isn't as seamless as the other one. The other one seemed to be pretty seamless. That's all.
All right, I know
this
Dan was
is my
doing
first
something.
time with this.
Dan was doing something trying to get his iPad going, I think, and that he was throwing a lot of audio out. I muted him a couple times, but we could definitely, Josh and I will talk about this with Eric over at WHCA too, and figure out a plan going forward.
Okay, great. Yeah, I really don't have a preference, but from the last meeting to this meeting, last meeting really went seamless, and this one here seemed to had to, ride it all the way through, where it's herky jerky, and I've had to reboot twice. So
I don't know if anybody else wants to weigh in on that, but I know Josh could probably speak to some of the security concerns about Zoom. I know the Hanson Selectmen had a, we'll say, prankster jump in to their meeting, and a few school districts have decided to move away from Zoom for those reasons. So
Well, that supersedes what my concern would be then.
that said, I
didn't
did
know
look
about
Zoom.
that. Okay.
Personally, both of these seem to work fine for me, other than I have a phone issue at times, and I think the audio with the Zoom works easier for me to do it through the computer. But I haven't spent, 10, 15 minutes trying to get the right speakers to work, so to speak. The microphone is working. That, and I bet you, John, if you can share with Dan's wife how to mute him, she'll pay you.
Well, I can tell you that today I spent the better part of 2 hours listening to the recording we did last week on Zoom, and there was significant sound interruption in the recording that's out on the web right now. Quite a few hiccups and quite a few instances where several seconds of sound were lost. Made it difficult in a couple of cases to really understand what was said without going back a couple of times and reconstructing. So either method has some elements of challenge with it. If for no other reason than there are probably 100 million people out there using the system and straining its capacity.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the big point, is that a lot of people don't understand is that, unfortunately during this situation, there's extraordinary pressure on all telecommunications. So while it might seem like, things are up and down or they're not working 100%, I mean, unfortunately, we may have limited control when it comes to, obviously having the allocation of the proper, bandwidth on all the different spectrums as far as the, residential and business and so on and so forth. But I think besides this, I mean, obviously we can talk more about this. John and I can talk, Eric, and we can all come to a conclusion, behind the scenes. I don't think we have to take up the meeting time to necessarily go through specifics.
Okay, anything else off topic? Address it now? No? Okay. So going back to the capital warrant articles, we went ahead and voted unanimously 7 warrant articles. And Frank, there's no new capital warrant articles, correct?
Correct.
So, so if everybody's still working off that same document, I sent out today the draft warrant that gives you an idea of the text behind the warrant, meaning that it's definite, it's what it's for, and the funding source. So I guess we'll go back into it, and the first one I'd like to address is which we got new information. Frank got new information from the fire chief, was capital article number 7, which and I'll just read it out here. It's to see if the town will vote to create a reserve for purchase ambulance and equipment account and appropriate $250 from the free cash to be transferred to the said account for the purchase of an ambulance or other vehicles and fire/EMS equipment for the fire department, or take any other action relative thereto. We tabled that motion last week. I'll entertain a motion to discuss capital article number 7.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, motion.
No, Fred Small will second it. Had to just find my mute button.
Okay. So discussion. The information that has new information that has come out is that that $250,000 is for 2 different things. One is the reserve for purchase ambulance amount of 150,000, and the remaining amount to be, I can't find my document just now, repairs to the ladder truck.
Right.
Now, repairs to the ladder truck was not in the Collins report matrix, but Frank, you mentioned that it had been added to subsequent matrix.
It had, right, it had been in the final Collins report. Let me grab it. The problem is there were so many iterations of this that,
Hey, Dave, if I have a question for you, for the committee,
Associated with this article?
yes, on this article.
Go for it.
All right, my question is the 250,000. I understand what he wants that for, for fire equipment and any repairs. But my question would be, say he has 250,000 in there and he spends 210,000. There's 40,000 left. Do we build back up to 250 and give him put only 210 the next year, or do we constantly every year put 250 in? And he constantly builds that account up so that when he does need an ambulance, he can put down 800,000 if he had to do that. I mean, that's what
crux, Dan, of the question right now. The intent, as best I can define for this article, is that we wanted to build a purchase reserve account.
right. Okay.
You wouldn't keep it at 150. You would identify what the needs are for a future purchase, and you would accrue funds so that
Okay.
by the time you're prepared to make that purchase, you have the cash available.
Okay.
So the idea was, if an ambulance costs $400,000, you put 150 away each year. In 3 years, you have enough money to buy an ambulance.
Yep.
So-
That's. I wanted to make sure that was understood.
So that's a part of it. The other question that we haven't really answered, and it's the reason I'm going to suggest that we amend this article, is that we haven't addressed the other critical equipment purchases that are planned. So you've got an ambulance, you may have a pump truck, you may have vehicle expenditures, and Dave made a good point last week when he said you need to have a straight line projection of what you need to buy in 3 years. And if in year one, you're planning to buy an ambulance in 3 years, you set aside the money for that. If in year two, you have another piece of equipment that's planned for purchase, you identify what that is, and you plan the budget to allow for those things. Dave's concern, which I recognize, was the idea that we would simply build up another reserve appropriation ambulance account and call it a different name. If I'm properly expressing what your concerns were, Dave.
Yep.
So I think what we need to look at here is we need to create the account, and we need to at least start to fund it. So perhaps the article should be, and let me just look at it for a second, to see if the town will vote to create a reserve for, create a reserve for appropriation, a reserve for purchase ambulance and equipment account, and to appropriate $150,000 from free cash to be transferred to said account for the future purchases, and B, to appropriate $100,000 from free cash to pay the cost associated with critical repairs to the town's area ladder. That does what the intent of the presentation that was made by the Collins Center and also supported by John, that you start that process, but it doesn't necessarily mean that every year you're going to have $100,000 to spend on equipment. It has to be prioritized. So the other alternative would be to write a second article to simply do the 150 on P7 and add in the capital article area 100,000 for truck repairs. I don't think there's any argument that we don't want an aerial truck out there that isn't safe.
Now, the goal is to, right, so just to expand on that, the goal is to, right, to have that ambulance expenditure anticipated, and then equal amounts of money brought forth until that expenditure is needed. So, so the ladder truck is a one-time expense. The issue I have is that I thought the thought was that at some point getting the ambulance reserve money into Article 2 and not require a warrant article each year. Isn't that the
No, you can't do that. Anything in Article 2 closes at the end of the year.
Right. Okay. So right.
It has to be an article that creates a separate account that is then provided. See, part of the issue when you look at Bridgewater and you look at us, it's a fundamental difference in the way they budget their funds and the way they allocate their money. It could also be said for Hanson. There are omnibus budgets out there that don't fund by line, but fund in lump sums based on a presented detailed budget. So when you vote those appropriations, they're not line items that go away each year. You would vote separately for all salary expenses. You would vote separately for all miscellaneous expenses, and you would vote separately for all capital expenses. But they would only be 3 votes, which would contain an omnibus budget that shows you where all that money's going and how it's being used. We're not prepared to do that right now. I don't know if we'll ever be prepared to do it, because I think the people that come to town meeting would feel that we're taking away their ability to look at each line.
Yep.
Even though it would be there in detail. So I don't know. That's not a battle I want to fight right now. The other option is to create multiple purchase accounts. So if this year all we're focused on is an ambulance, and then next year it's determined that in 4 years we're going to have to replace a pump truck, then that has to be a separate reserve for purchase account. And you could, I guess technically, you could create a section in Article 2 that would vote this money each year for the purpose of placing it in reserve fund.
Right. That was my question. So I mean, wouldn't that make sense? Because it's I think obvious to everybody that you need an ambulance. An ambulance has a life expectancy, and that it's a reoccurring cost after X amount of years. Instead of having to vote an ambulance and other items each year in order to build up that reserve, wouldn't it just be easier to keep it in Article 2, keep those in Article 2 as a line item, and therefore it's an ongoing each year funding source for a known capital cost and therefore it doesn't, therefore, when the need to purchase it comes up, it's not a large, it shouldn't be any expense at that point, but
Right.
it's a surprise or large expense.
But remember that Article 2 is strictly raise and appropriate. So if you're transferring that money from free cash, it's not part of Article 2. See, you have to come to grips with where the money's coming from and how it's being held.
Yeah.
And this is probably a topic better reserved for the FinCom than the Capital Committee, only because it's how we move cash and how we appropriate it. It would be the decision of the selectmen how to present it on a warrant, and it would be the responsibility of the Finance Committee to advise on that presentation. So
let me ask it a different way. Is there a way to have multiple reserve for account items that reoccur each year that don't have to be voted as a warrant article?
no, because the way we vote, again, we don't have an omnibus budget. The way we vote is everything in Article 2. If you read Article 2 on the warrant, it is for the items to be budgeted and spent for this year. It's only for 2021.
Yeah. So if this, I'm hoping it's this, at some point, this committee will have a schedule of large known purchases like the ambulance or large trucks for DPW or police vehicles. Like, we'll have a schedule of that, and say between all those different vehicles, based on their lifetime, say just for argument's sake, every item has a lifespan of 10 years, and each item costs $100,000. We're talking ambulance, everything from ambulance to any type of fire vehicle, any type of vehicle, DPW, and maybe even those items within public safety that have a lifespan, meaning turnout gear, PPE, tasers, weapons. Say all that, we had all that. We divided it all up and hit, we created that matrix. They all have different time, in reality, they'll all have different time frames, but it comes up to each year, in order to fund the anticipated purchase at the time when it's needed, with $100,000. Is there a way to say, okay, so could a warrant article just be placed and say this $100,000 is for these items identified on the matrix, reserve for future purchase accounts? Am I asking that correctly?
Yeah, it is essentially what we'd be doing in voting this. You're setting an amount of money to be reserved for a future purchase, and then the accountant books an account for that purpose. And next year, your vote would be the same, $150,000 to be added to the reserve for purchase ambulance account. You may have an article that has 3 or 4 lines to be added to X, to be added to Y, but it can't be part of Article 2, because Article 2 says to determine how much money the town will raise and appropriate for general government, protection of persons and property, health and sanitation, public works, veterans education, library, recreation, and unclassified. There's nothing in there about capital purchases or other things.
Okay.
And that's why the others are articles. In an omnibus budget, there would be a general budget line that says $450,000 for capital expenditures. Boom. And then you go to the capital account and you see where that money's going. That's the way many towns do it. We don't.
Okay. So right. So at some point, potentially, capital article 7, could actually have, a dollar value list all the items in you know, whatever those values are, and vote all them under one warrant article.
And yes, you can do that. Or you could build in an article too, if you chose to write an article that says, basically what we're going to say about the ambulance account, to appropriate $1,350,000 in free cash to reduce, I'm trying to think of the language, to reduce expenditures in Article 2, or reduce the levy, reduce the amount of funds required for levy, so that it would offset that. There would be a balancing act.
An offset, okay. Huh.
Can I chime in real quick?
Go ahead, Josh.
Sorry, can I chime in? So it's not, I mean, it's two sides of the conversation there. I don't know if you, Dave, you started asking about like reoccurring capital asset costs as far as like, you know, the departments, like, you know, for technology, for instance, you know, obviously, you know, every 5 years or every 10 years or whatever it might be, we replace certain things. You're looking for a sort of a capital list, but unfortunately, I don't think, I mean, without properly tracking our capital assets using some piece of software that allows us to, you know, gauge that information over time. I mean, tracking this information in an Excel spreadsheets is certainly not doing us really any good, other than obviously being able to present the information when we need it. We need to be able to actually, you know, plan for this and be able to see, you know, okay, well, 3 or 4 years out from now, what's the list look like, and what do we need to actually replace, so we can get a tally and know, okay, well, we're going to need, you know, let's say $300,000, you know, to be able to replace X, Y, and Z across various departments.
Yep. Yeah,
yeah. You were asking?
Yeah. Well, what you're discussing is, what you're describing is what the capital improvement plan would be, and it would have that matrix, and it would show every item that, you know, large purchase item that is ongoing. Technology is slightly different, just as important, but slightly different from tangible items, right? So it's, I don't want to confuse the conversation with technology, but it's just as important as all the tangible items that we're talking about, and would be included in the matrix. And it would just what it would allow for, once you get that matrix done, and you have either a warrant article or a line item in the Article 2, would allow for money, equals amount of money, will be appropriated each year for a known future purchase, and not which then would allow for your levy to remain static, in, you know, not necessarily flat, but in a non up and down manner, where sometimes what you have is a lot, you know, if you just didn't have the money, for example, say we didn't have the money, we needed a new truck, and now you have, you know, just like we have now, we have a DPW build truck request for $132,000. So if this matrix was developed ahead of time, that $132,000 would have, assuming that that vehicle reached its life expectancy, would that $132 would already be expended. So therefore, we can therefore free cash gets when you have the matrix, the free cash isn't you know, it's not you know, it's not, the department heads aren't crossing their fingers and saying, geez, I hope I have enough free cash to do this. They have it. So when it's built into the budget versus a large expenditure all at once.
Right. No, exactly. And I mean, I've been trying to put money in technology stabilization for years, and obviously the money hasn't been there to do that. But that's a great example of, obviously, we spent $100,000 back in 2012 to replace the core network, and if we didn't have that money in stabilization, it would have had to have been raised and appropriated.
Right. And right. So say we had to raise and appropriate that. I'm getting some video freezing going on here from everybody. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Can hear you fine.
Just refreshed.
We lost your video source. You have your audio.
Tell your daughters to stop getting on the internet.
There we go. You're back.
Yeah, sorry, let me get my phone
I
off.
think we've kind of touched base on this
So I think,
before
I think,
with needing some type of asset management.
Right, exactly.
You know, we've
yeah, I
talked
think
about.
John mentioned this before, though. It's going to take us a few years to really get off the ground running. I mean, obviously, all these capital plans that were done by the individual department heads to put a list together of what's there, what needs to be done in the next few years. I mean, that information, obviously, again, was on spreadsheets, and just to, give everybody a chance to review it and look over it and to really, put together a solid plan. But again, that's static information unless it, it changes and we have the ability to actually track it over time.
Just as a quick idea.
Josh, you're 100% right.
Go ahead,
You really
Fred.
are.
Sorry, Don, let's go to Fred and go back to Don.
And Josh, perhaps you're familiar with the product a little bit. A few years ago, the schools purchased School Dude, or a module for School Dude for facilities. And I'm wondering if we could add the inventory for Whitman, even call it a class, so that the students would be learning how you track capital expenditures, etc. And that way there could provide some sort of a matrix and a plan for us. If I remember correctly, when we were originally looking at it, it had those capabilities.
Yeah, I mean, I've looked at a couple of different options. I think there's actually some free open source software out there that'll allow us to actually track the assets. And I've actually heard some, positive feedback from, a few other towns that are actually using it. School Dude obviously is something you'd have to pay for, or something would have to obviously, look into.
We already pay for it though. We already pay for it.
Yes. I don't know what the, ability is for us to be able to add on to it or be able to utilize it without, a big deal.
It is Whitman Hanson.
That's
Yeah,
true.
but grade licenses don't work that way.
No,
But if it was
absolutely.
a class that the students were utilizing, it'd be utilized for the students of Whitman Hanson. And it just so happens that Whitman gets a little bit of a benefit on it. And also, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world for the students to know.
But the software has seats assigned to it. If you were to take that software and install it on another network, it would be apparent to School Dude that you were using it in a way other than your agreement allows you to.
Yeah, I mean, we'd have to look at, like I said, all kinds of licensing options out there. I mean, as to whether or not it'd be an educational or it could be considered, municipal. Unfortunately, the companies vary from, company to company, and some will allow educational use, other ones won't, depending on what the usage is. So
I'm just trying to think outside the box.
no, absolutely. I mean, I'm open to all options.
Don, I lost your video if you're still there.
Yep, I'm still here.
Okay, did you want to add to this?
I think we already went over this whole thing before.
Yeah, it's a very similar discussion that we've had before, absolutely.
And what I recall is the biggest portion is the data entry.
Mhm.
Who's going to do that? I mean, buying the platform is just appropriating the funds and purchasing. The data entry that in the administrative portion of this, that is an ongoing, continuing job. It's not something that you can just input at once. It's a living document that constantly needs attention, and that's the hurdle. I think the biggest hurdle.
Without a doubt, and I know the software that we got, I want to say it was like $5,500 annually for the license and the software. And it's sophisticated enough that a technician, someone goes into room 201, and I'm just picking a number, at Conley, they pull it up and they can say, okay, change the air filter, click it off. So now it's automatically right in there. So you can pull up room 201 at Conley at the end of the year and you can see everything that was done there. But you could also anticipate future needs as well, which would be part of, the budgeting process or capital needs for the future. But yeah, it does have to be inputted. There's no question there.
Well, the other thing is they have a product called Facility Dude, which I subscribe to. But while it's able to give you the broad strokes information you need. In order to get it, you have to provide information in minute data fields. And it just didn't work for us. I canceled the subscription because we couldn't continually fill in all of that data.
As long as they don't come out with committee dude, I guess we're safe.
So,
we're getting into Go ahead, Frank.
we do have a fixed asset program. Through our current software vendor, we have a fixed asset module that tracks capital information that's provided by the accountant when the purchases are made or the payments made. So we have the ability to produce that information, but it's somewhat limited. Again,
Would that give us an inventory as well?
No,
It's very limited, very limited.
it'll give us what we bought and how much life is left on that purchase. So if we were to buy, for example, a core switch and we spent $150,000 on it, it would be booked as a capital asset. We'd amortize it over whatever life we determine that switch carries. And then each year it would depreciate that purchase until you hit zero. So, but it's not what we really need.
Right. So we're getting into the weeds here. What I really wanted to, can you all read that? Is that legible?
Yeah, detailed capital
Detailed
plan.
capital plan.
Yeah. So that last line there, you can see that Bridgewater anticipates their firearms to be replaced every 3 years. Right.
That's a little too small for my eyesight, but
Sorry.
Yeah, you got to zoom in on the end if you want to see that.
To be replaced every 3 years. There we go, right there. So you can see they have a cost of $21,000 for 3 years. I'm seeing it backwards. That's my problem. And they
sent us that plan, didn't you?
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. So if and then they have, again, if you look back at that document, there's a whole bunch of stuff here: ambulances, vehicles, and we have 6 years out. We can see that an ambulance, they anticipate changing replacing their ambulance, at least for purchase ambulance. They have a bond for 5 years to purchase that vehicle, and what they do is they amortize it out each year, $62,000 a year. That's what I would anticipate this committee asking department heads to do. At least the three bigs, right? Public safety and the four bigs, I guess. Public safety, Whitman Hanson, and technology, and then we could identify what of those what needs to be put on that matrix in order to stash, to set aside money each year. That way, when the purchase is needed, you don't need to borrow, and you don't need to, if there's no money available in the levy or free cash, then you would borrow, but then maybe you would need to borrow outside the limit, and then raise taxes outside the levy, to avoid all those situations. Have that matrix available for a lot of items. I'm not saying every item. Have that money available, either in a warrant article or in a Article 2 article. That way, it's part of it's a known expenditure that once expended doesn't require borrowing or raising taxes. We went a little off subject on that. We're still on the fire P7, but that's my point. What Frank had mentioned was that the two items within Article 7, one is a reoccurring cost, one is not. So,
can I add a couple of things?
Go ahead, Don.
So I think we're all in the agreement that some type of asset management forecast is needed. And I think everyone kind of is aware that it's going to take administration duties to be able to perform this. I don't know if we roll this out separately, if we look to appropriate a warrant for this software. I don't even know what software to pick. I don't know who would actually select the software. It would probably be the IT people to vet out what is appropriate for our needs. But I think we're all in agreement that it's needed. It's just, I think the appropriate steps would be just like buying a truck. You got to vet it out first, and then you got to price it out, and then bring it to the table. I think right now we have to go off a spreadsheet, as antiquated as it is. But I think it is what we have in front of us. We just move forward.
I'm going to send you an email. I'm going to send an email right now to everyone with the link as to what I'm looking at, what I've been looking at, and what we just need to obviously take a look at it closely. And I'll review it with Frank, and we'll see what we can do about implementation wise. It's open source software, so it's there's no cost to it. Just obviously we have to install it and just make sure it's going to work for us.
And what would you recommend, Josh, having all the department heads input their own forecast, or?
Again, that's probably a discussion for another time, but I mean, it all really depends on, I don't know how, again, we have to really get into the software to see how it works. Is it very user friendly and all that fun stuff. So.
Looks good.
But I just sent you an email with the link, and it also, when you get to the link, it'll bring you to the demo page, and you can log in and take a look at how everything is all, listed in the software, and see if that will be helpful, for reporting.
Did that screen share work? Is anyone able to see that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I think it's
Yep, I
awesome.
see it.
It would be nice
I'm just
if we
doing
had-
it for future use if we needed it. That's all.
I think it's good to have on here for, for Frank's CIP, the project points and the funded request articles. I think we should have it on there for those too, and highlight what we've already approved.
Yeah, no, I mean, Dave, actually, you could probably pull up the agenda and go through the agenda on the screen too. Instead of actually having everyone have their own agenda, we could look at the screen and go through it one by one.
Okay, I'll remember that for the next meeting. So we kind of devolved into away from Article 7, but just to bring it all back into perspective, is essentially, is that P7 has two costs. One's a reoccurring, one's not. Frank, were you able to find the ladder truck repairs on the Collins report? I've looked a few times. I haven't been able to find it.
Yeah, it was on page 23 of the master report, which, let's see. Up to 21. I don't have my glasses on, but oh, this is a friggin' report that was printed so that you have to turn the book around each time you look at the other side of the page. That's the reason why I haven't familiarized myself with it. You have to flip it sideways instead of over. My glasses on, but let me struggle.
I don't have the master.
Fred, do you mind taking out that screen?
Take it off? Okay.
Yeah.
Frank, do you have something to share?
Say again.
You have something you wanted to share with the committee? You mentioned screen sharing.
Yeah.
There should be an overlay option on the screen itself, right next to the like the mic and camera. There should be an option for screen share.
I'm trying to see how I stop screen sharing on mine.
Using the PC, Fred?
Yeah. Yes.
Is there an option on the screen if you would down the bottom next to the mic and camera? Is there an option for screen?
No, that's the weird. Oh, here, hang on. That might have done it.
Yep, there you go.
Okay.
Josh, I could not control that either as the presenter, which I thought is odd. I'll have to figure that out. I should be able to shut that
Oh,
down.
okay.
I should be able to shut that down, and I couldn't.
Yeah, no, good point.
Where am I? Okay. So, cancel. Let me cancel that. Let me enlarge this.
Meeting limited to 2 hours, and then we lose the track of time there.
Let's see. All right. I just need to make this a little bit smaller so I can get to. I'm just trying to get this thing to where I can show you what I'm looking at. Screen. Oh, yeah, that's really helpful. Share. Let's see.
There we go. You got
All
it,
right.
Franks.
So what you see there, Dave, we were talking about getting it fixed into a budget so that you see it year after year. You have to do it at the total appropriation level. So what you have in front of you right now is 6 years of total appropriations. And you see the direction we're moving in, but it's graded. The big jump is from 18 to 19. And the reason for that is because we voted to spend basically $4 million out of enterprise funds and an additional $1 million for water pipes. So you're going to see these jumps and then they level off. But when you vote a budget, in many communities, what you vote is the total appropriation for each class of expenditure. We're not there. We're not going to be there next year either. But ultimately, that will give you what you want, which is to continue to provide ongoing appropriations without having to have articles for each one of them because you're voting a block of money. Like I said, my feeling is if you try to present that to the current town meeting attendees, you'd get a revolt because they're used to doing things the way we do them. Okay, I don't know how to shut this off or resize it, so I'll have to try and figure that out.
I'm pulling mine down. I can pull.
All right.
I can circle back to the Collins report question while Frank's trying to remove his screen share.
Yeah.
So there is a page near the back that has basically capital projects funded from outside sources. And within there, everything funded from the ambulance receipts is included.
Right.
And fiscal 21 includes $100,000 to refurbish the 2004 ladder truck.
Awesome. Where do you see that?
Near the back fold-out pages of the Collins report.
Yeah.
There's one it's all ambulance receipts, Chapter 90, Green Communities, MSBA Compact. It's the the way they categorize projects, this is all the outside sources.
Yep, I see here now. Yep.
Yeah, their score on the ladder truck is actually only 50 compared to a lot of other, for something that had outside funding is pretty low. But it doesn't diminish the need to refurbish our 16-year-old equipment, $1 million+ equipment.
And remember, the intent there was to take it out of ambulance.
Correct.
It doesn't diminish the need, but it better defines what we're going to be voting on, I guess. Here we're seeing a report that was developed over a year ago, and so this doesn't demean the article at all, but it just states that that the fire chief had the foresight to know that this charge was coming up in 2021. But I think it better defines it. I don't think we're talking. When it says refurbish, I guess the definition of that, you could take that definition differently from maybe how the article has been described in the past. But that's fine. So right. So that's fine. So that makes me feel better that it's essentially what I just said. It's a known, what is previously known to be an expenditure with an anticipated fiscal year 2021 funding. All right, that's good. We're fine.
Just for curiosity, what are you seeing right now from me?
For you, you're good.
Now you're back.
All right. So, any further discussion on this?
I shut that down just so that you know I figured out how to do it.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, except now I'm blocked out of. Oh, here we go. See if I can do this without disconnecting.
Oh, good.
I don't want to leave.
You're breaking up, Frank.
Well, I see nothing, so that's the problem. I just
Try
see a screen that says Whitman Building Facilities and Capital.
Trial and error.
I'm not getting you.
Try the down. Bring your cursor all the way down to the bottom. See if your microphone and camera pop up options.
They're both on.
Okay, we can see you.
I can see nothing.
Can you
except
help?
a gray screen with the meeting information.
Right. I don't see Frank's picture either.
Oh, that's weird.
I can see him fine. Look up, Dan. He's right above you.
Yeah, I mean, we can see his camera.
No, he's not. Above me is Aaron.
You can hear him.
All right. So,
Serious feedback.
This
Frank,
is
even
getting
with,
late.
even with that video issue, are you prepared to continue on the meeting?
Yeah,
Are you okay?
John, can you,
I think what I may do is just exit and rejoin because I can't clear this.
All right, we'll pause. I'll entertain just pausing.
yeah,
the,
John mentioned that he took the screen sharing from.
All right, make a motion to take a 3-minute recess.
Any seconds? Somebody second that, please.
I'll second that.
Sounds good.
All right. Any discussion? Further, all in favor? Raise,
Aye.
raise. And I'll take
Aye.
it.
Aye.
So that's a
You can roll call by hand.
roll call by hand. Dave Cordero, Josh, Fred Small, Justin Evans, Aaron Taylor, Dan Salvucci, and Don Essen in the affirmative. All right, we'll just wait for Frank to get back.
Second.
You got 3 minutes, Frank.
He jumped off already, so hopefully he can log
Tough
back
when you
in.
have to go to.
I don't know if what I did that would have caused
3 minutes.
his video to go away, though.
How do you get more than just 6 people on the screen? I only have 6 faces.
Because you're on an iPad, right?
Yeah,
Didn't you? You had 9 last night, didn't you?
yeah. But that was on
Zoom.
Zoom.
Do you only have 6 the entire time?
John, what's the time limit on this meeting? 6?
Right.
No, there is no time limit. I had it set up for 4 hours, so.
Well, I got a meeting at 7 o'clock on the phone with school
That's all we
committee.
have. Frank,
Well, it's only 5:30. You got plenty of
Frank
time.
disconnected.
Yeah, I know it, but I got to eat too, you
Yeah,
know.
but we all have 6. There's only 6 right now.
I know it. 5:30 now, yeah. So I got what, 5 minutes to eat? Hey, Nan, what's for supper? Oh, she said it's ready. Maybe you see me eating. Now I can see you, Josh.
Take your 2-minute
Now
break, quick.
now I can see Dave. I mean, you keep popping, different people jumping in now. How'd you
The
do
meeting's
that?
recorded, I believe.
I don't know. I'm gonna go
We're
get something.
live.
That same thing
Wow.
happens to me, Dan.
Huh?
The same thing happens to me. Video pops in and out.
Yeah. I try to put on who's talking. At least I can see that I know who's talking.
Okay,
Now I
what
can see
about,
Fred, now Fred Small just popped on.
I think he's back.
You back now, Frank?
yeah, what a crazy,
Go get something.
I mean, just because we're not familiar with it, I'm sure.
Yeah.
We're not on.
Were we utilizing our 90-minute time limit, or are we going a little over today?
I wouldn't want to go over.
All right, so let's get on to what we came here to do.
All right, Dan, you're coming back. I don't know if you can hear me or not. Don, are you there? You're Don and Josh. Oh, there's Don.
I'm here. Yep,
Just,
I'm here.
Josh, you're still gray on my screen.
And Aaron is missing in mine.
All right, let's give it a few.
Josh is just,
Thank you.
no picture and no voice right now. He is on.
They did take a 3-minute recess while you were getting back on, so maybe there he is. There's Aaron. So it's just Danny.
Josh took a break to get something he could chew on.
Yeah, right, huh?
Hey, how do you think I feel? I can smell my dinner downstairs coming up the stairs.
Let's get it here.
I'm still at the
This is
office.
pain for me.
I'm still at the office.
Now, me too, actually. Only my office is 12 steps up. Something like that.
I don't have 4 monitors though.
Justin is desperately hoping he can keep the kids at bay a little longer. That's the little four-legged one.
Oh yeah. Yeah, she ate her dinner. She should be good for a little while.
That's okay. I had to want to croak mine. We interviewed a few people for the business manager position from the school today. And right when we started to discuss everyone, my dog decides to just start barking up a storm, play with me. That went over big.
Oh, well.
Salvucci's eating dinner.
He has his thing strategically aimed toward the stairs. Are we ready to start?
Yeah.
Let's go for it.
All right, back in session at 5:33. All right. We left off with a discussion, a motion and a second on Capital Article 7 discussion. Any further discussion on that? All right, let's take a vote. So it's got to be roll call.
Which article?
P7.
Okay, let me go back.
Would it be
I
appropriate
would
to
like
amend?
to suggest
All right.
that we vote on an amended article. That would include A, to establish a reserve to purchase ambulance and equipment account and appropriate $150,000. And B, to purchase and to appropriate $100,000 from free cash to restore the aerial mount ladder.
Okay. So we have a motion on the floor to amend Article
Seven?
P7. Anybody need that read back?
No, but should they be two separate articles, Frank? One to do the actual ladder repair and one to create
It
the
can be done
reserve?
either way. If you want to do it separately, then I would go to the reserve article for capital and insert there to raise and appropriate. Change this to 150 and then go to article,
Maybe P7A and P7B?
no, I get what Fred's saying. I don't really have an issue with either one, but if you want to appropriate capital articles, where I thought we had a reserve, but we may have utilized that article.
Frank, I think
In my
Article,
opinion, Frank-
I think Article 8 is open on the warrant. You had that listed as reserved for Article.
Which one?
Article 8?
Seven, eight. Yeah, that's what I was looking for. Okay, so Article 8, it doesn't fall specifically under capital, which is really where I wanted all of these things to be when we're discussing them. We know that we're dealing with capital articles. I don't know, it's all based on appearance. With an 8.
Fred,
We already have that there, so I just go with the A and B approach.
Okay. So the motion on the floor is to amend Article P7 to read in, let's see if I can get this right.
Actually, Dave, this committee doesn't have to vote to amend the article because what we're doing is we're recommending the capital spending. So what I'm presenting to you is Article P7 will present two appropriations, one for 150 to create a reserve for purchase account, and one appropriation for 100,000 to repair the aerial mount ladder.
Okay. So
do we need to withdraw our original motion, which was based upon that article? I'll withdraw my second.
Yeah,
if
we'd have to
desired.
make a motion to, if it'll help to get the ball rolling, I move to make a motion to recommend Article 7 to appropriate $150,000 from free cash to create the reserve for purchase account and to appropriate 100,000 from free cash to repair the aerial mount ladder.
Oh,
do we have a second on that?
I
I'll
will
second
second, Mr. Small will second it.
okay.
Shouldn't
And that's Article P-7.
Right.
Frank,
Any
you said,
discussion?
Frank,
So
you
for
said,
discussion,
sorry. Frank, you said the 150 was coming from free cash. Isn't that coming from the ambulance account?
Well, yeah, this year, well, thank you for the correction. Both
Or
of
is,
those. Both of
is
those.
the ambulance
will
account
come from
going
the
into
ambulance.
free cash first?
Say again?
No.
Are those monies going into, they can't go into free cash because then you can't spend them until they're certified, right?
You can't enter free cash during a fiscal year. You cannot. What is in play on this warrant is that the money that is spent down from the ambulance fund will be reserved for appropriation. Ambulance will be used for whatever purposes it's designated, and any money remaining in the reserve for appropriation ambulance fund will be closed to free cash at the end of the year.
Okay.
So thank you for the correction. It's 150,000 to appropriate for the reserve for appropriation ambulance account and 100,000 to be appropriated from the reserve for appropriation ambulance account.
100,000 from free cash.
No, I take it all from reserve for appropriation ambulance.
Okay. All right.
We want to burn that money down first.
Okay.
And for the sake of the minutes, I can withdraw my original motion. Now that we've introduced and amended.
Well,
Okay.
Frank, that case, you have to totally rewrite 7.
Did you hear that, Frank?
I heard something about rewrite. I don't know. What
Right,
you mean.
well, because P7, the town to vote to create a reserve for purchase ambulance equipment account. And then it goes on to appropriate 200,000 from the
All right.
transfer to that account.
If it'll make it easier for you, I'll type the amendment right now and send it.
That'll be, I mean, we understand what we're trying to get accomplished, so we can do the wording later. Right, what we're looking at is the deal with the funding and how much money we have to spend.
There's no question that there is money available in that appropriation account.
Right.
I expect it will be $1 million by the time we have our town meeting.
Wow. Excuse me. I'm gonna go get my supper. I'll be right back before the vote.
Okay. Goodness. I think I could have missed this. I like an open word. I mean, is nothing cooperating for me here? Somebody's got major feedback.
It's Dan getting his dinner. That was the microwave.
Oh, tacos.
Here we go. P7. Be at the town. Hey. Town will vote to create a reserve for appropriation ambulance and equipment account and appropriate 150,000 from.
And for anybody who's not talking, you might want to mute your microphone to eliminate the
What's going on?
feedback.
Fred, shut off your secondary voice.
Okay. So I'm sorry, Frank. Are we waiting for the amendment?
Yeah, it'll be ready in a second.
Okay. Take your time, Dan. Don't.
I am. Would you like a bite? Yeah. Wait a minute, where am I? There you go.
It's good.
You transfer.
Dave, I'm not sure if you hear me. You
What the
hear
hell
me
is that?
okay?
Yeah. Whoever that is talking, if that's you, John, yeah, total reverb. I don't understand a word. Oh yeah, you're in outer space.
You sound like the guy that's on,
It's not me. It's Josh, I believe.
Oh, it's Josh.
I
Josh,
mean, if you're not talking, it might be best to actually.
sound like the guy on the Big Bang Theory.
yeah, whoever that, yeah, whoever that was, total reverb. Couldn't understand a word.
Okay, here it is. Let's see.
My audio working now?
Now it's working,
better.
Josh. What'd you do, buy a
Okay, good.
reverb unit? Okay, you have it.
Now I can't hear Dave.
Dave, you're muted.
Sorry about that. The, now I can't find the email, there it is. So the amendment on the floor, is to amend Article P7 to state, A, to see if the town will vote to create a reserve for purchase ambulance and equipment account and to appropriate $150,000 from the reserve for appropriation ambulance receipts account to be transferred to the said account for the future purchase of an ambulance or other vehicles and fire EMS equipment for the fire department. And B, to appropriate $100,000 from the reserve for appropriation ambulance receipts account to pay for the repairs to the aerial ladder truck or take any other action thereto.
Now that sounds better.
Okay.
Now, let me explain one thing. By doing it this way, you're creating an account that can be reserved for purchase for ambulance and equipment. If you want to further limit it, you would then have to create separate purchase accounts to be created on the town's, on the books of the town. So that's going to be something that the selectmen and the finance committee are going to have to decide going forward, whether they want to support a single article concept or specific article concept.
Well, right. That's kind of what we were discussing earlier. But essentially, if there were if anyone had any issues, they could, and said, well, geez, the spirit of this article was really just for the ambulance account. They could just vote
Right.
to amend the value of for the ambulance and deal with it that way.
There isn't a lot of exposure because the limitation is it's a reserve for appropriation account. So it still has to go before town meeting again to spend it. So regardless of how much money's in there, if the fire department says, okay, this is the year I want to buy an ambulance and it's $400,000, they still have to put an article on the warrant to spend from that account.
Right.
So I don't think there's any risk in doing it this way.
So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
By doing this, we're taking the control away.
Lost you, Josh. I see your
Josh.
lips moving, but I don't hear anything.
I don't hear anything
Can you
either.
hear me?
No,
What is going on with your audio?
still sound like the Big Bang Theory.
You should text it.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
better.
That
I think it's your chroma cam.
better?
Let me put it this way. We heard you.
Hello, testing 1, 2, 3.
There you go.
Can you hear me now?
No,
Very delayed.
We had an
Josh,
IT director that
Write
fixed
it
it.
on the scratch pad and hold it up to you.
Hello, you
This
hear me
is like
now?
watching a mime show.
Really delayed.
Uh,
I should have had a meeting at home.
You're gonna have to hold the thumbs up to vote, I think.
Hey, did anybody else just have a power outage?
No,
Still delayed?
I just lost my power for about a second and everything, I had to reboot everything.
where are you, at home?
I'm at home, yeah.
And your battery in your computer didn't keep it running?
Well, it went out for, I say like a couple seconds. The laptop went black. And then I had to start everything back up again. I don't know what the deal was.
Oh, you gotta plug that in and let it charge.
It's plugged in.
She would have lost her internet connection anyway because the power went out.
Yeah.
Not necessarily, they have batteries.
Okay. You're back.
So we were having some technical difficulties. You didn't miss anything much. Well, you missed the
Oh, is it?
you might have got the email. Frank has voted to a motion to amend Article P7. Josh, I think you had a question when your audio started giving out. Do you still have that same question?
Can you hear me now or no?
Yes, delayed,
No.
but we can hear you.
Now his video's frozen.
Yep, now you're still live, Josh. Oh, your head moved.
Max Headroom.
What about now?
Got it?
Testing 1, 2, 3, nothing?
Wade.
We heard testing 1, 2, 3, but it was a while ago that you said it. If we close our eyes and don't see you, we can hear it.
Do you want to try your question?
What about now?
Josh, you're delayed about 2 seconds, but if
Still delayed?
you just keep talking, we'll hear it.
So the big difference between, I guess, this what we're doing here is essentially we're taking the control away from the fire chief and we're giving it to the taxpayers to be able to vote, or the voters, I should say, to be able to vote this stuff in town meeting.
I'll respond to that. And I have to say, no, the control has always been with town meeting. No matter what we do, a reserve for appropriation account requires a vote of town meeting to spend it.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Frank.
So do we have a second on Frank's motion to amend?
Yes,
Again, we don't,
the small seconded.
we don't amend the articles. We simply.
No, it's a motion. Motion to recommend.
All right, so we'll go back to motion to recommend as amended.
Justin withdrew his original, no, he withdrew his original motion. I withdrew my original second.
Yep.
And then Frank put the motion on the table, which was seconded. So nothing needs to be amended.
Seconded by Frank Small. Okay. So, all right. Any further discussion? All right. We'll take a roll call vote. Don?
Yes.
Dan Salvucci?
Yes.
Frank Lynham?
Yes.
Aaron Taylor?
Yes.
Justin Evans?
Yes.
Frank Small?
Yes.
Dave Cordero? Yes. Josh McNeil?
I saw yes. We'll just wait for it.
All right, we got a verbal, a motion yes,
Yes.
thumbs up, and a hands up. We'll take that as an affirmative. So that is passed 8-0-0 unanimous. All right, we got through one article.
That's encouraging.
It's 6 o'clock. How does what's everybody's thought of moving forward or availability for next week to
Yes.
Next week.
next week? I got it. Thumbs up for hands up for next week or hands up for continuing. No, hands up for next week. Next week. So 1, 2, 3. All right. So it seems like everybody wants to continue next week. Availability for next week, same thing, or later. Dan, what time do you eat dinner?
We eat dinner at 5:30. An hour and a half meeting. And we got one article done.
All right,
Now, if we can start at 3:30 next week,
We can start
I
at 3
don't know if
a.m. in the
Justin
morning.
we should be done by 5:30.
I can do
Yeah.
3:30.
You can do 3:30
That's about
next
the earliest I can do.
Thursday?
Yes.
Do we want to continue with Thursday?
Fine.
Yeah.
That's fine for me.
Okay.
So that's
Yeah,
16th.
what's the host
Is that
say?
whoever that was? Josh, was that you? All right. So the thought is Thursday, April 16 at 3:30.
Josh looks very stoic there.
Next week, Thursday, 3:30, and then we'll cut out once at possibly 5:30 when. So anticipate
Yeah,
3:30.
we probably should have these meetings like start at 10 o'clock at night instead.
I would suggest we go back to Zoom.
Yes.
All right. So any thumbs down for the proposed next week at 3:30? Okay, no thumbs down. All right, so that works. Does anybody have any on the remaining capital warrant articles? Does anybody have any questions for Frank that may be sent over to department heads?
Dave, let me simplify that. If anyone has any questions on any of these, send me an email and I'll follow it up and get the information you need.
Would you entertain a motion to adjourn?
Entertain a motion, yes.
Second.
So moved.
Moved by Fred Smalls,
Mr. Small?
seconded by Frank Lynham. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Roll call is unanimous, 800. Yeah,